On a late evening, November 10, 2024, at the Crystal Lake Hotel in Illinois, an unexpected incident disrupted the peaceful atmosphere of this quiet resort. Hannah Shepard, a 35-year-old woman, after a long and exhausting day, faced utter frustration when her hotel room key failed to work. Unable to access her room, instead of waiting patiently, Hannah quickly spiraled into a fit of rage. The tension escalated, and shortly after, the hotel staff had to call the police to handle the situation, setting off a chain of chaotic events no one could have foreseen. The evening began relatively normally on November 10, 2024, at the Crystal Lake Hotel in Illinois, a popular resort known for its tranquil and serene atmosphere, a place where travelers often sought solace to escape the noise and stress of everyday life. This was the perfect place to unwind, recharge after long working days, with the fresh air and the breathtaking scenery of Crystal Lake providing a sense of calm to the visitors. However, for Hannah Shepard, a 35-year-old woman, that evening was far from the peaceful retreat she had hoped for. After a long, stressful day filled with work and little time for herself, she was eager to get to her hotel room, relax, crawl into a warm bed, and sleep soundly. But things didn't go as planned. Her room key wasn't working, leading to frustration and exhaustion. She had no intention of arguing or causing a scene, simply wanting to get into her room and rest. But everything seemed to be against her. What appeared to be a small mishap soon became the catalyst for an unexpected chain of events, and the tension began to rise. But instead of easily entering her room as she had on previous occasions, this time, Hannah's key card malfunctioned. She stood in front of the door, swiping the key in the lock as usual, but all she heard was the cold, unyielding sound of the lock clicking, without it opening. She tried again, her frustration building as the key card still didn't respond. At first, she hesitated, trying once more, hoping for a different result. But when the door still wouldn't open, the frustration quickly morphed into anger. She slammed her hand against the door, as if striking her own patience, then hastily swiped the card again, her eyes weary and tired. "Did anyone call me a VIP?" she muttered under her breath, but her words weren't a simple question or a passing remark. They were a bitter jab, full of hidden meaning. It was the frustration of someone who felt overlooked, as if not receiving the respect she thought she deserved. In fact, her dissatisfaction was not just due to the malfunctioning key card, but from the feeling that she wasn't being treated with the importance she felt she had paid for. She wasn't just trying to open a door, she was struggling against the sense that she was being disrespected, as though she wasn't a valued customer, but just another passerby unworthy of attention. In fact, her dissatisfaction was not just due to the malfunctioning key card, but from the feeling that she wasn't being treated with the importance she felt she had paid for. She wasn't just trying to open a door, she was struggling against the sense that she was being disrespected, as though she wasn't a valued customer, but just another passerby unworthy of attention. With every second that ticked by, her irritation grew not only because the key wasn't working but because she felt belittled in the very space she had paid to occupy. The hotel staff, with their patience and near-miraculous professionalism, did their best to handle the situation. They gently explained that the key card might just need to be reactivated to work properly and tried to calm Hannah with polite and reassuring words. However, their efforts did nothing to alleviate the situation. Instead, they made it worse. Instead of feeling reassured, Hannah, now seething with anger, began to criticize not only the malfunctioning key, but also the staff's attitude, calling them useless and demanding immediate access to her room, without any explanation. She had lost all composure, her words sharp and filled with rage. Hannah's fury was like a fire igniting in the dark, causing the surrounding atmosphere to grow tense and suffocating, making those around her uneasy. Not stopping at criticizing the key card, she incessantly questioned the hotel staff about what she perceived as their fault, escalating the situation and making it uncontrollable. Hannah's impatience and combative attitude not only rendered the staff powerless, but pushed everything too far, allowing her exhaustion and frustration to spiral out of control. Finally, after a long period of constant arguing, advice, and failed attempts to calm Hannah's anger, everything seemed to be in vain. The feeling of hopelessness began to rise, and someone within the hotel, whether an employee desperately trying to work in silence or a guest witnessing the chaotic scene, decided to call the police. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the hotel suddenly shifted, The situation was no longer just a personal conflict, but had evolved into a potentially shocking event. The arguments, the unreasonable demands, and Hannah's fiery temper were no longer the only issues. It had now become a face-off with the authorities, an unimaginable spectacle. And then, everything erupted. Instead of returning to her room to relax after a long, exhausting day, Hannah found herself in an ironic situation, the center of attention, not because of her petty grievances, but because the police had been called to deal with a crisis. Everything was no longer simple. It had turned into an unbelievable farce, both tense and absurd, as instead of being in her room, she was now involved in a confrontation with the police, confused, chaotic, and unpredictable. When the emergency call about the chaotic situation at the Crystal Lake Hotel was relayed to the police department, not one, but 7 officers were immediately dispatched to the scene. It was as if they were responding to a murder case or some other unpredictable serious matter. The team arrived with rare speed and determination, bringing with them the gravity that such a major crime would naturally require. However, when they arrived, they were not met with a blood-soaked scene, as they had imagined during their journey, but with a woman standing tall, flailing her arms wildly in the air, shouting as if the whole world were against her. "This key card is definitely a conspiracy," she screamed, her voice filled with rage and helplessness, as if this was not a minor hotel issue, but a grand plot designed to destroy her. As the officers did their best to intervene and resolve the situation, every explanation they offered was immediately interrupted by Hannah's unreasonable demands and an ending list of demands that made no sense but were delivered with stubborn resolve. "You have to open the door for me right now, or I'll call the manager," she threatened, glaring at them as if she could devour them with her eyes. One of the officers glanced at his colleague, feeling only confusion and the sense that they were being made the subject of a joke. Everything was not a complex case, but rather a simple misunderstanding, yet it was unfolding like a never-ending slapstick comedy. Each time they tried to resolve the situation diplomatically, her sharp reactions and complete lack of cooperation only made things more tangled. The officers' patience began to wane, as each solution was met with stiff opposition, leaving them feeling like they were trapped in an endless loop with no way out. It wasn't just the confusion of how to handle the situation, but also the growing exhaustion and frustration that began to take over their minds. They were not just facing an angry woman, but it felt like they were having a futile conversation with someone who would never listen to reason, even though the help was right in front of her. The situation continued to escalate, becoming more tense and uncontrollable as the officers, despite their best efforts to approach her calmly and patiently, could not get Hannah to cooperate. They had tried everything to ease the situation, offering explanations and assistance, but their words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Not only did Hannah refuse their help, but she also reacted in a way that was completely irrational. A bizarre act that left everyone around her dumbfounded occurred. She began hitting her own head forcefully. This action, completely inexplicable in such a tense situation, seemed to be her attempt to relieve the anger swirling inside her. "I do this to feel less tired," Hannah stated nonchalantly, as if this bizarre behavior was entirely rational, leaving everyone around her shocked. The officers and medical staff stood frozen, unsure how to react to this situation. Hannah's explanation, though entirely illogical, only made things more awkward. While she continued to act as if nothing was wrong, those around her exchanged bewildered looks, unsure whether to intervene or let her continue. With each passing minute, the air grew heavier, and it seemed like all reasonable solutions were being blocked by the unyielding wall of Hannah's stubbornness and defiance. The situation was becoming more complicated than ever before. When medical personnel arrived at the scene to assess Hannah's condition, they immediately realized that she had no intention of cooperating. Instead, she remained entrenched in her defiance and confusion, as if the people trying to help her were nothing more than bothersome interruptions. Hannah looked at them with disdain, her eyes betraying an obvious lack of patience, and as those around her desperately tried to figure out how to help, she coldly muttered a condescending remark, "You're not doctors, I just need to get into my room." Her words were like a cold knife stabbing through the efforts of those around her, leaving them feeling belittled and useless in her eyes. This brief yet highly charged exchange reflected not only Hannah's complete lack of respect for those trying to assist her, but also the growing sense of hopelessness in the situation. Not only was she unwilling to accept help, but she also made those around her feel as though they had no choice but to continue struggling in vain. The event gradually morphed into a chaotic farce, with the police and medical staff playing the leading roles, struggling to find a way to calm the rising tension. However, every effort proved futile, as Hannah's rage and obstinacy only continued to push everything further out of control. The scene not only made the onlookers feel uncomfortable, but also forced them to question the very nature of non-cooperation. It resembled a tragicomedy, where one person's stubbornness led to a series of clumsy and futile actions from others. All the efforts, whether from the paramedics or the police, appeared as pointless games in Hannah's eyes, intensifying the suffocating atmosphere. This situation was not only a challenge for those trying to help but also an ironic twist, where every attempt seemed to highlight the deadlock shared by all parties involved. After a long period of escalating tension and endless arguing, Hannah's patience and tears finally ran dry. The overwhelming sense of helplessness and sheer frustration triggered an outburst of anger within her, like an uncontrollable bomb going off. In a moment of total loss of control, she lunged at one of the paramedics, the only person trying to approach and de-escalate the situation. This action was not just a rash decision, it was a primal reaction from a woman completely overtaken by negative emotions. She had lost all rationality, unable to distinguish right from wrong, knowing only that she was being treated unfairly and wanting to push back against everything. Hannah had crossed a line, and her impulsive act only complicated the already tense situation. The law enforcement officers present, whose job was to maintain order and ensure safety, were forced to intervene more forcefully. The police quickly realized that without decisive action, things would continue to deteriorate. When the arrest order was executed, Hannah did not just resist, she fought back fiercely. She screamed in outrage, her voice filled with confusion and anger. "I haven't done anything wrong. You've got the wrong person." Her words, full of denial, were a testament to her stubbornness and lack of self-awareness. She couldn't see that it was her aggressive attitude and violent behavior that had escalated the situation into something so tense and hopeless. Hannah's refusal to cooperate and her irrational behavior made everything spiral out of control. She failed to realize that each act of resistance was only digging her deeper into a hole, forcing those around her to intervene more aggressively in order to resolve the situation. However, as the situation grew even more tense, Hannah continued to resist violently. As the officers attempted to subdue her, she unhesitatingly kicked one of the law enforcement officers. This action immediately made the situation even more serious and served as clear evidence that she had committed yet another offense, assaulting a law enforcement officer. Hannah's obstinate refusal to cooperate seemed to have exhausted the patience of the police, and even those who had tried to help her began to grow weary of her attitude. One of the officers, sighing in frustration after witnessing this scene, couldn't help but shake his head and mutter with a tired smile, "She could definitely get a role in an action movie." This sarcastic remark, while playful, reflected the officer's frustration at dealing with an increasingly difficult situation. After a series of dramatic acts of defiance and non-cooperation, Hannah ultimately had to face the legal consequences. She was brought to court and pled guilty to assaulting a law enforcement officer, resulting in a sentence of prison time, probation, and a series of financial fines. The court didn't just take her violent actions into account. It also considered her obstinate attitude and defiance towards both the police and the medical personnel, who were simply trying to help her in a tense situation. One of the officers involved, recalling the event, couldn't help but laugh with a hint of irony. "She could be a star in a movie about chaotic hotels, but she definitely won't be getting any free rooms again." This comment not only reflected the officer's sense of helplessness and disappointment in Hannah's actions, but also served as a reminder of how seemingly small situations can quickly escalate into major issues, sometimes causing people to pay a heavy price. It turns out that even a broken hotel key card can lead to consequences no one anticipates, and while Hannah may have become the star of a police story, she still had to face the legal repercussions of her actions. This sentence was not just a legal shock for her, but also a lesson in emotional control and the importance of addressing problems calmly, rather than letting oneself be swept up in unnecessary panic and tension.